For those of you that literally just joined, I was, I guess, repeating a thought process or pattern that I've had for a really long time now. Just sort of explaining something that a lot of people in my comment section, as well as a lot of people on Twitter and just in other comment sections that I've been frequenting, that I've been seeing quite a lot. And it is from people, you know, the sort of iffy about the Dragonflight lore and, you know, should I be excited for Dragonflight? Should I not be? What exactly is it all about? The reason I am super excited for Dragonflight is Dragonflight really is what we would call a soft reset of the World of Warcraft universe. And what I mean by this is if you're a new player that starts out in Dragonflight, you really, based on the lore that we've got so far, most of the lore we have right now is lore that we've never really had. So you look at things like the primalists. The primalists existed really in a realm just short of speculation, but not really nested or settled within the lore or established lore of World of Warcraft. Sure, the Dragonflights are very established in World of Warcraft, but insofar as the Dragonflights trying to get their power back or anything like this, there's not much in the old WoW that you need to know in order to get into Dragonflight and actually follow the story. You know, you're getting introduced to all of the Dragonflights, the same as all other players will be introduced to it, especially if you play through the Drakthir campaign. You see that Blizzard took great pains to ensure that new players truly understand the story of the dragons and how the Drakthir were created and all of the dragons that led to this creation. So, you know, it's a good starting experience and a good springboard. If you compare this to expansions like Legion, BFA, or Shadowlands, if you're a new player and you started playing in Shadowlands, you had this crazy lady that ripped open the sky. You don't know who she is. You have no idea where she comes from. You also don't really know why she ripped open the sky, so you would be forgiven for thinking, oh, this is one of the bad guys. No, this is actually not one of the bad guys. This is just a very nuanced character that has been around for a really long time and has had a very bad life. But because you've not played through that, you wouldn't know. And then you meet up with this jailer guy. Of course, no one knew about the jailer, so all of us are new in this one, but at least we had a lot of context to Death and the things that Death have done on Azeroth to at least give some weight to these characters. You meet a guy called Uther, who's really just a blue smurf, and you have no idea who this guy is or why he would be important to the story. So really, you would have been lost as a new player within Shadowlands. Dragonflight is a complete reset of that. It's a return back to more normalcy for a lot of us established players, and then for a new player, it just opens a new chapter, and there's enough breadcrumbs from the old chapters to sort of lead you into what the story should have been, and it does feel like Blizzard has at least stayed or remained cognizant of that idea. If you look at the legacies, so a lot of people complained about the legacies, that they were, you know, not focused enough on certain things, and we wanted to see this and we wanted to see that. I watched the legacy chapters really as you're a new player, you've never played World of Warcraft, what is necessary for you to know? That's how I watched the legacy chapters. Yes, they did keep in mind that, you know, established players would be watching it as well, but a new player watches that. The new player learns about Galakrond. Doesn't learn everything about Galakrond, but this is the point. You don't need to learn everything. Maybe you see this big-ass dragon, you're like, whoa, I wonder what that is. Well, it doesn't take long for you to literally just Google who is Galakrond to find some information and resources on who Galakrond actually was. At the same time, the player gets introduced to the proto-drakes that would eventually become the dragon aspects. The player gets introduced to Nozdormu, and Nozdormu takes us through these timelines and shows us what actually happened. You get introduced to Deathwing as one of the dragon aspects, and you learn that Queen Alextrasza is the queen of the dragons, but Deathwing betrayed his brothers and sisters. You learn about the dragon soul, all that stuff, and as a new player, you feel generally caught up to the story once you start playing. This excites me. From a lore perspective, it excites me to see what happens next, because we can already see if you do Ulduman, the new dungeon, and you find the scriptures within this new dungeon, you will find that Blizzard is introducing a boatload of new concepts. Lore concepts specifically. So we learn about the heretics. Who are they? What are they? Are these keepers that turned their back on the Titans? Did they follow the Void? Did they follow something else? Are they heretics because they actually sided with the proto-drakes, the primalists? Well, we don't know, but it's really interesting. Even as an established player, it's really interesting to sort of learn that even at the inception of what we would call modern day World of Warcraft or post Black Empire era of World of Azeroth, that there were things that happened there. There were clashes that happened there that we were never told about. Insofar as we were concerned as players, the only clashes that ever took place during the Black Empire were between the Titans, their keepers, and the Old Gods. And then, of course, all the machinations and creations of the Old Gods. But now we learned that's not true. There were also clashes between the heretics and the Titans. There were clashes between the Titan keepers. And I love the fact that we're going to be exploring these unknown elements of World of Warcraft and Dragonflight to give us a little bit more of a clear vision of what our early universe in World of Warcraft was. All in all, I think we should be excited for Dragonflight. So hopefully, if there are people, and I know there's going to be people that say, well, Akalon, I don't care. I don't like the new direction of the story. Blizzard can go suck a dick or whatever. And in that case, what I'm going to tell you is, cool. That's the beauty of games. If you don't want to play it, don't play it. It's really as simple as that. But if you like story, if you care about the lore of World of Warcraft, this really is the penultimate moment for Steve Denuser and his team to prove that they understand how to make a story for a game. Because there's been many excuses over the last few years. We've heard from people that the working conditions at Blizzard was absolute shit. A lot of developers felt scared to go to work, felt uncomfortable to go to work, and I can imagine as a creative personality, if you're going to work, and not even just creative personalities, anyone, if you go to work and you're afraid of the things that may happen at work, you're afraid of being groped, you're afraid of sexual innuendos and sexual advances being made, welcome or unwelcome, if you're constantly looking over your shoulder, you're not going to be able to put out the product that you really want to put out, right? Because you have to deal with all of this other stress that's coming at you, you know, like a freight train. So Blizzard cleaned up that shit, which means no more issues, drinking breast milk and all that crap. Yes, Blizzard cleaned this up. The company seems to be on a new trajectory. It seems like a lot of the developers are really happy to work there now. We'll see, because now they have no excuses. There's no lawsuits to fall back on. There's no bad behaviors to fall back on. There is just you are at work, do your job. And then for the lore team, there's always been this sort of thing that they've been hiding behind, especially in Shadowlands, where while Steve Denuser didn't create Shadowlands' story, he sort of inherited it from what can arguably say it as one of the worst guys that worked at Blizzard, right? Just a horrible fucking human being. Even though a lot of the stories that he created were great stories, you can't take away from the fact that the people that worked with him fucking hated him on every level. So it could be that things just deteriorated to the point that his own team couldn't really do a good story because they just hated their jobs, or whatever the case might be there. So he's gone. Steve Denuser inherited the story, tried to do the best he could with what he had, you know, and it was just a failure. And I think everyone can admit that it's a failure. Even Steve Denuser in his interview with Noble admits that they made mistakes, things that, you know, looking back, they would have liked to do differently, especially with things of the Sylvanas novel, where they kind of missed the mark on a lot of the intrinsic motivations of some of these characters that wasn't given to the players when the players needed it, and instead was left for the novel when the players no longer needed it. At that point, we were over it. We didn't understand what Zaval wanted. Zaval did a bunch of things, and we still didn't understand what he wanted. I mean, reading afterwards what the motivations for a character would be is not the same as knowing it when you're going into it. It doesn't shine a light in a good way. It just sort of leaves the player with this, well, I should have known this before. It probably would have changed my experiences a little. This time around, Steve Denuser doesn't have this to fall back on. He is the sole creator of World of Warcraft Dragonflight's story. It is just him and his team. They have a narrative director, which is literally one of the most important things if you want to focus on a story. Let's see. This is the moment for them to prove that they can tell a good story again, because it's not like Blizzard have never been able to tell good stories. Blizzard have always been able to tell amazing stories. It's one of the reasons we're all here, because we fell in love with World of Warcraft storytelling. You know, that's why we're here. I wouldn't have a YouTube channel if stories didn't matter for the players in World of Warcraft, at least some of us. Let's see what Steve Denuser and his team can do, and ultimately, this is their moment. This is their final moment, as far as I'm concerned. That's why I'm excited for World of Warcraft Dragonflight, because it seems like everything is at least going in the right direction.